She used arsenic to poison and kill 21 people, 3 husbands, 6 of her own children, her own mother, 6 stepchildren, a close female friend, and a lover. She seemed like a demon crawling up from hell. Adultery, bigamy, fraud, and murder. She cut down anyone in her way like a force unstoppable. Anyone who stood in the path of her desires ended up drinking tea laced with arsenic. This woman, the first female serial killer in British history, was known as the most vicious woman in Great Britain. But what I see is a madwoman manufactured by her era, her marriage, her poverty, and a system of patriarchy. When the darkness inside expands without limit, and the boundaries of order collapse under repression, what truly drives them into madness? And who is really pulling the strings behind that madness? The answer may be hidden beneath the calm surface of everyday life. The story takes place in England in 1857, in a small seaside town where most residents were fishermen who relied on the sea to survive. Her father died early, her mother remarried, and Marian seemed to become an extra, unwanted presence, perhaps for love, perhaps out of defiance. She eloped with a poor young man. She believed her life would turn out like the stories in books, growing better and more prosperous with time. Yet her reality remained a complete mess, and she returned home in defeat and shame. The bitterness of the past had long been erased in her family's hearts, but the cost had been enormous. During the 4 years she spent eloping, Marian lost 4 children, with only 1 daughter surviving. Along with crushing poverty and a body worn down to the bone, her mother was heartbroken and looked down even more on this son-in-law. Marian tried to defend him, but nearly broke down from a single sentence her mother said.
It's not the same for fathers.
A child grows slowly inside a mother's womb, gaining movement and form, yet after months of pregnancy, it can turn into nothing but a pool of blood. From a safe birth, to nursing and cherishing, to watching the child grow for months or years, only for a minor illness to take them away when there is no money for treatment, leaving behind a cold body. How could a man, who becomes a father by contributing nothing more than a seed, ever understand such bone-deep pain? They are more like bystanders in this tragedy, and then they go on to create more of it. At this time, the mines were hiring workers, but could this frail son-in-law handle it, especially deep underground where danger was constant? Her stepfather, just in case, persuaded him to buy an insurance policy that cost only £1 a year. If he died in an accident, Marian and the child would receive £35. It was meant as a kind gesture, yet it unexpectedly became the very thing that would lead him to his death. At this point, Marian was still innocent and kind, and had not descended into madness despite losing her children. She fulfilled her role as a housewife, doing laundry and cooking, preparing 3 meals a day, and calming her husband's restless energy every night. When the baby was only 3 months old, she became pregnant again. With the birth of another child, life seemed to return to normal, and the couple regained hope for the future. However, disease ran rampant in that era, and Marian's 6th child was taken by scarlet fever. The key was not simply that a mother lost a child, but that she kept losing them over and over again. You welcome each new life with hope, only to lose them again soon after. This repeated torment is the most terrifying part, because you never know what went wrong. While burying her child, Marian was already 6 months pregnant again. The underground work became too much for Billy, and they could not continue living with her parents, so he moved the small family to a neighboring town. Before they left, her mother gave Marian a teapot as a keepsake, never expecting it would become the weapon used to poison 21 people. The place they moved into was like a festering intestine, filled with the stench of waste, fish, and mold. While shouting, chaos, and groaning echoed without end, what Marian found most unbearable was that the rented room was crudely furnished, damp and dark, and when she lifted the blanket, she could even see dead cockroaches covering the bed. She looked at her husband with pleading eyes.
Little bit of cleaning up, it'll be home sweet home in no time.
A single sentence from him made the heavily pregnant Mary and begin a massive cleanup. She scrubbed the floors, tidied the room, and bought arsenic from a shop to kill the pests. But no matter how hard she tried, this place could never become a warm home. By evening, labor pains began, and with her experience, Marian delivered the baby without anyone's help. By the time her husband returned from work, their 7th child was already asleep. Her husband seemed unaware of how hard survival truly was, tirelessly planting seeds before pulling up his trousers and heading out to sea for work. Marian became pregnant again. The lack of food, the endless housework, and the non-stop crying of children consumed almost all of her life. Her love for her husband was slowly worn away by the grind of daily survival. At this moment, a reckless miner entered her world. The man constantly showed an intense desire for her, impossible to ignore. After learning about Mary Ann's situation, he slipped into her home under the cover of night. For a woman living in such misery, it took only the slightest temptation to make her surrender and fall into the trap of his tenderness. Not far from her children, she betrayed the husband who was drifting at sea to earn a living. Before long, the household money was gone, the rent was overdue, and even the shop refused to give her credit anymore. Her 8th child, and the only boy, passed away, crushed by the weight of life and the unpredictable cruelty of fate. It became hard to see any smile on Mary Ann's face. Her expression was always faint, filled with endless bitterness. Life had stripped her completely, leaving behind nothing but an empty shell. Misfortune always seems to strike those already suffering. Her husband broke his leg on the ship, lost his ability to work, and was sent back by the ship owner. When Mary Ann saw his crippled leg, all the resentment she had built up finally erupted.
"You're no use to us at all."
Her husband still spoke with the same tone, wearing the same expression.
Cup of tea. Aye. Everything will look better.
Mary Ann had had enough. She had had enough of the self-deception, enough of never having enough money, enough of endless housework, enough of the dust in the house, and enough of the bugs crawling beneath the mattress. Her husband had made her bear so many children, yet could not keep them alive or provide for them. He forced her into a life of constant debt. He left her empty and unfulfilled, turning her into a woman seeking comfort in an affair. Everything seemed to point at her husband and say, he was the one who ruined her life. He was the one who stood in the way of her happiness. At that moment, there was only one thought in Mary Ann's mind: kill him. So she reached out with a sinful hand. Her husband quickly became too sick to get out of bed. The doctor could find no cause, assuming it was a complication from his injured leg. Weak and frail, her husband still spoke words of self-deception.
As soon as I'm right, I'll be back down those docks banging on every door for a job.
But the reality was that no one would want him, and he would only drag Mary Ann down. She could not even bear to imagine such a life. So she handed him a cup of tea laced with arsenic. Within days, he was tortured beyond recognition. High fever, chills, and constant vomiting. Yet he still called her his angel and apologized for failing to give her a better life.
"I'm sorry too, love."
After hearing his apology, she turned and walked back into the kitchen, taking out the arsenic from the cupboard. But before she could poison him again, her husband had already passed away. Soon after, she received an insurance payout, tasting for the first time the bitter sweetness that came from a life exchanged for money, and she also learned that her husband had bought insurance for the children.
I never knew you could do that for a child. Oh, it's blood money. I don't want to take it.
Your poor husband did it for you, Mrs. Mowbray. Take it. It's yours. It's all legal and above board.
She returned to her family with 2 children, and through a friend, she found a job as a nursemaid, with food and lodging provided and a wage of 1 shilling a day. It seemed as though life had finally begun to clear after the storm. She took off her hat, stepped forward, and tried to feel the sunlight and the sea breeze. This was the brightest smile she showed in the entire story, and also the only one, because her child had died again. Mary Ann's tears had already dried up, yet her stepfather still tried to comfort her with God's mercy. An ordinary person would lose their mind after losing even 1 child. So just because Mary Ann seemed stronger, did she deserve to endure all of this? Since prayers were useless and the pain seemed endless, then to hell with God and to hell with redemption, she decided to become her own god and make herself happy. Arsenic seemed to give her the power to become a god and take control of fate. While working as a caregiver, Mary Ann met Ward, a strong and honest miner. After they married, Mary Ann immediately persuaded him to buy an insurance policy. Did she already harbor dark intentions at that time? I don't think so, but she soon realized this man was even worse than her first husband. He looked strong on the outside, but was incapable as a man, and in such a vast labor market, he could not even find a proper job, bringing home only 4 shillings of relief money. She did not want to be the wife of a useless man, and while she did not know whose wife she wanted to be, she knew she wanted useless men far away from her. So the familiar teapot returned, and her second husband quietly exited her life once again. Mary Ann collected another large sum of insurance money, but the clinking of coins did not awaken any tenderness or conscience in her heart. Instead, it opened Pandora's box and set her on a dark path of killing for insurance money. Her kind friend, feeling sorry for her repeated losses of husbands, offered her a new job, this time caring for the children of a widower who had just lost his wife. This opened a new world in her barren life. For the first time, Mary Ann stepped into a wealthy neighborhood, and for the first time, She entered a comfortable and warm house. She hid her envy and tried her best to appear professional. The employer's sister was very satisfied and entrusted her brother and the children to Mary Ann's care. Mary Ann hurried back to pack her things and moved into the employer's home. She had a feeling that this house would become a new starting point in her life. Mr. James, who had been depressed since his wife's death, was soothed to sleep by her gentle singing. Mary Ann suddenly realized that beyond the useless man at the bottom of society, she might have better choices. The burning desire in her eyes was noticed by James's sister. Not long after, the youngest child in the household died in her care. After burying the poor child, James's sister wanted to dismiss this ill-intentioned nanny, but James believed she was overthinking, and the two argued fiercely before parting unhappily. Mary Ann heard every word of this conversation while hiding behind the door. To rise as quickly as possible, she decided to change her strategy, gaining the children's trust to gather information, and imitating the habits of James's late wife, even placing his slippers by the fire to warm them just as she used to do. The man, who had never moved on, was once again swallowed by overwhelming grief at the sight. She appeared at just the right moment.
I know what it is to live with grief. Through all of the losses I have endured, I have had one comfort.
Her gentle voice seemed to carry a strange power, and James instantly lost all reason, treating the nanny as a substitute for his wife. Grabbing her chin and kissing her passionately, Mary Ann, secretly delighted, pushed him away while playing hard to get.
I shall be gone by first light.
No, you can't leave. The children need you.
There are nursemaids aplenty.
I need you.
She naturally stayed on and even began sharing a room with her employer. At the same time, she saw a completely different kind of life. She worked herself to exhaustion in the hospital for a single shilling, while a wealthy child's outfit cost £5. Mary Ann began to long for this kind of life. But just then, her friend came to her with news that her mother had fallen gravely ill and did not have long to live. Yet this was the perfect moment for her to secure her position as Mrs. James, so she refused to return home, using her busy work as an excuse. Unexpectedly, James's sister learned of this and immediately arrived to take over the care of her brother and the children. Mary Ann, who had not returned home for 2 years, had no choice but to go back. Seeing her stepfather and daughter waiting eagerly, she rolled her eyes and walked into the house without even greeting them. Her humanity had been eroded by the dazzling world she had seen, and she had no patience left to care for her dying mother. She resumed her affair with her former lover Joe while dreaming of becoming a wealthy man's wife. After returning home, her mother smelled the coal dust on her and angrily questioned whether she was earning money by selling herself.
Married twice, widowed twice, and never a tear have you shed for either of them. Got life insurance on this new one.
Her daughter's guilty expression and evasive eyes gave her the answer, but she never imagined her daughter would go so far.
Let me make you a nice cup of tea.
That sentence became like a noose of death. In the next second, a cup of tea laced with arsenic was brought to the victim's lips. Mary Ann showed no guilt or sorrow, abandoning her stepfather and taking her only daughter back to James's house, where she used her body to win over the man and successfully secured her daughter's place there. When James's sister found out, she immediately stepped forward to confront her, only to be taught a harsh lesson in return.
Here's the hold I have on your brother.
Raised with the manners of a proper lady, she had no way to deal with a woman like this and fled in defeat. Already pregnant, Mary Ann wanted to secure her position as soon as possible and forced the man to give her a proper wedding, but James hesitated. After indulging in warmth and desire, he suddenly remembered the image of himself as a devoted husband. His wife had only been gone for 4 months. How could he marry someone else? And besides, the children would never accept it. Anyone who stood in her way would be removed. Mary Ann would not allow anyone to block her pursuit of happiness, so the blue teapot returned once again, and this time her targets were the man's children. The first deliberate act of killing might bring inner struggle, but once it becomes a habit, does numbness follow, even when the victims are innocent children? What she did not expect was that her own daughter accidentally drank the poison tea and became a stepping stone in her pursuit of happiness. In less than a week, 3 children in James's household died, and only the eldest son, who lived with his aunt, survived. Looking at the freshly turned soil covering her daughter's grave, she finally felt real sorrow, and even the thought of receiving insurance money could not make her smile. Joe told her to stop chasing illusions, saying they were the same kind of people.
I'll not be a coal miner's lass for as long as I live. There's not a woman alive, but she wants better than that.
Taking advantage of the moment, Mary Ann secured her position and became a true wealthy wife, with a comfortable life and a husband who treated her with gentleness. She had already reached the best life she could hope for, but why was she still not satisfied? After marriage, Marion quickly revealed her greed. As if trying to make up for decades of material deprivation overnight, she not only demanded money from her husband, but also encouraged her stepson to pawn his late mother's belongings as her spending money, secretly taking £50 from her husband's account in just 1 month. James was a shrewd businessman and soon noticed something was wrong.
I must have done something very wicked in my life. After everything that I have lost already, to deserve now to be tied in wedlock to a liar.
After being exposed, Marion secretly took the child and returned to her family, planning to come back after her husband calmed down. But James was ruthless, moving away overnight. What she thought was leverage instantly became a burden. Left behind at the doorstep, her stepfather could not bear it and sent the child to James's sister, having always relied on men to survive. Once she became homeless, the only way Marion could think of to secure her future was, once again, to depend on a man. This time, she set her sights on her friend's widowed brother. This heartless woman, in order to marry him, even chose to harm the very friend who had always helped her. That woman never knew, even in death, that her kindness would cost her life. This time, Marion became both the wife of a minor and the lover of another minor, and to make their affair easier, she even persuaded her husband to move closer to Joe. Yet before peaceful days could even begin, and before she could buy insurance, her husband died in a mining accident, leaving her with another burden. She had no choice but to move into Joe's home with her child. But affection alone could not sustain life. Marion found work as a part-time servant. This time, her employer was not only wealthy but also educated, awakening new ambitions in her. Like a venomous snake awakened after the melting of winter snow in early spring, Marion bared her fangs and lunged at anyone who came close. This time, Joe became her target. She once again became a widow, and along the way poisoned her stepson, arriving before the wealthy man unburdened. But the man discarded her after using her and planned to dismiss her.
Not now we're going to have a little baby.
Blame the child on your pitman, Mrs. Cotton, if you can. Unless you want the whole village to know you had 2 men in your bed before your husband was cold in his grave.
For the first time, the usually resolute Marion broke down and threw away the poison teapot. After her hysterical outburst, she comforted herself the way those men always did. Everything will get better. I believe that sentence is more toxic than arsenic, more poisonous than any substance. Every life Marion took was also driven by the belief that things would somehow become better. That belief manipulates the human mind, making people want to keep living, and pushing them to do anything to live better. The next morning, she sat at the door pretending to cry, spreading the news of her stepson's death. When the grocer heard this, and recalled that most of his arsenic had been purchased by Mary Ann, he reported it to the police. After relentless examination by doctors, traces of arsenic were found in the child's blood. The police arrested her and exhumed other bodies to investigate their causes of death, confirming they had all died from arsenic poisoning. Her stepfather came to visit, the kind old man overwhelmed with grief, asking for an answer. Why did she kill so many people? And the answer was simple. Life was so bitter that it left no room to taste its sweetness. When I needed love the most, I was never truly loved. Later, no matter how much love I received, I could no longer value it. Her once simple gaze gradually turned greedy and terrifying, and in the end, it carried a cold cruelty and disdain, as she continued to claim her innocence until death. Not long after, Marion gave birth to her 11th child in prison, and after the baby was adopted by a kind neighbor, she was led to execution. According to historical records, Marion killed between 13 and 21 people, but the true number of victims may never be known. Her tragedy lies not only in choosing arsenic to rewrite her fate, but also in the era that never offered her a way out. Her madness was a desperate answer written by poverty, disease, and relentless pressure. She believed poison could bring happiness, only to discover it led her into deeper darkness. And standing on the other side of history, we should see clearly that behind evil, there are often countless ordinary lives crushed into pieces. It is easy to judge a person, but to understand a fate requires deeper reflection and greater courage.